Top 5, a show where we count things down from number 5 to number 1. And this week, two surprises for you guys. Surprise number 1, Ashley Victoria Robinson joining us on the show this week.
Woo!
Surprise number 2, at the time of this recording, E3 is currently going on, so what better topic than top 5 classic video games? So you guys are hearing this like 6 weeks from now.
Yeah.
And it's not going to make any sense. So, surprise!
At that point, all of the video games announced for E3 will feel like classic video games.
Oh, yeah, man.
Most of them leaked before the announcement anyway.
Yeah. So here's a conversation that we had before the show. And I know people are going to think classic video games. And to me, video game is anything that is in a video form and is a game, right? Mm-hmm. So this could be, an Atari game. This could be a video arcade game. This could be a Nintendo game. It could be a Switch game. Well, I don't know if Switch is 15 years old. But that's the other thing, is something that falls into the quote-unquote classic category by the definition, something that's at least 15 years old or around that.
The automobile definition, at least.
Yes, that's the automobile definition. Correct, Matthew. So, Matthew, why don't you start us off with your first classic video game?
Well, and this is the thing. I really didn't pay attention to the word classic because it generally doesn't have a whole lot of meaning. But I am old, so all of my stuff is going to be old.
Yeah, it's still going to fit in the category.
My stuff's all old except for... No, all my stuff's old.
Yep. All of my stuff comes from the days when you would walk into a building where a guy, and his name was usually either Cal or Bubba, had rented a space and filled it with these stand-up consoles, and each stand-up console had a little computer in it that doesn't have as much power as the ignition key to my car. And you would walk up and you would put a quarter, which, by the way, actually quarters are little coins.
I use those to do my laundry.
Yeah.
By the way, I will have you know, I
call
literally
them
went to an
loonies.
arcade yesterday. They're very popular in LA right now.
They're fancy now.
They are retro, baby.
Don't even talk retro to me.
They bring
All
you
right.
drinks now.
You stick in your quarter, and the first thing you hear in any given game, a really good game, is a kind of a mission statement, almost a compass statement of what you're going to get out of the game. Gorf used to have the Gorfian robots challenge you, and Pac-Man goes something. But the one that always got me when Otter worked in the arcade was a game called Skate or Die. Now, Skate or Die was so named because when you put in a quarter, the game would go skate or die. And you would have to ride your little skateboard down a ramp and then a sidewalk, and you jump over things and you'd avoid and you'd try not to die. And every once in a while, a swarm of bees would literally come from nowhere, and the swarm of bees would try to destroy you. And the game would be like skate or die. And being not a particularly good video game player, my choice was usually or death because they were out of chicken.
Cake or
But exactly. So when you're playing Skate or Die, which I think also came in a console with 720 as a name, but I've actually seen it in both forms. Now, whether or not that's one was the console and one was like an NES version, I don't know. But the thing about Skate or Die that sticks with me even years later, mostly because of my fear of wasps and flying insects that buzz, is that I'm going to die. But the game would actually challenge you as you would walk by, and it would yell out to you. It would call out to you. It would say, come, play me, come die horribly, and then go home and have terrible dreams of swarms of wasps eating you in your sleep. By the way, you're fat and have bad knees, so you can't really skate. You might as well do this. And that's why Skate or Die was my number 5.
Very, very nice. Ashley, you are our guest this week. How about you share your number 5 with us?
My number 5 is the most recent video game, and the one that I thought might be cheating because it came out in 1990. But per our discussion, it's not cheating.
That's 20 years ago. That's almost 30 years ago.
I know, but I come from the definition of classic from the literary point of view, which is 50 plus years. And I know that 50 plus years ago, video games were not really a thing, but I was like, I don't know, like, is this, because when you think retro, right, you think like the games that you would have at an arcade or at
right.
any of the throwback things. So But apparently this works. I picked this game because my all-time favorite Nintendo character debuted in it, not because I was especially good at it. But I picked Super Mario World because the greatest video game character is Yoshi. He's she, even though they are of indeterminate gender. If they lay eggs, they are probably female. Are my favorite thing about the Nintendo world. There's a lot of other really great characters. But for me, and for what I think of as video games, it all kind of starts from this. This was my first introduction to any Mario characters. And then I kind of went backward and retroactively engaged with some of the older games because my older cousins done had them. This also spins off Yoshi's Island, Yoshi's Story, the one where they're all little woolly Yoshis. Everything that I like about the universe comes out of this game, so I had to include it, even though I still think it feels too modern, which is like an insane thing to say. And I don't know. This might be the only SNES game that I have on here.
Okay.
I don't know. What is time?
What is time? I have no idea.
Time keeps flowing like a river.
Time is a flat
To the
circle,
sea.
right?
Keeps slipping into the future.
Time is the fire in which we burn.
Rodrigo is here, and Rodrigo is probably, I don't know, you're our video game expert, I guess, Rodrigo?
I mean, only by proximity, I guess.
Yeah, in that you probably play more video games than the rest of us. I don't know.
Yeah.
Ashley went to an arcade this week, so who knows?
I did.
So what do you have for your number 5, Rodrigo?
My number 5 is a game that is more recent than Ashley's most recent game. So if you are worried about the definition, I'm already probably pushing against it.
Yay!
But yeah, so you're clear. Most of my games are actually going to be relatively recent, but there's a reason why they're on this list. My number 5 is Parappa the Rapper. 1996, I want to say. Originally probably found by most little babies in a PS1 demo. And the game is about you're a rapping dog, and you have to go to the mall and also rap and also learn how to drive and just be generally a teenager. But it's a rhythm game, and it's generally considered to be the very first rhythm game. So without Parappa the Rapper, no Guitar Hero, no Rock Band, no little mobile games where you tap to the beat, right? There were other games that incorporated rhythm aspects. There were other games that allowed you to create music, but what we now consider to be a rhythm game was pretty much kickstarted by Parappa the Rapper, and further exemplified by it being sort of the granddaddy of all rhythm games. I was terrible at it, and as I continue to be terrible at rhythm games today, I definitely went to a friend's house recently to play Guitar Hero, and let's just say that it's good that they had a mechanic that allows other players to save the song from just crashing altogether, because that was basically it. Everybody had to save up their star power or whatever to keep me from dying on stage. But yeah, my number 5, Parappa the Rapper, very important game, even though you don't hear a lot about it and you don't hear people talking about it.
Didn't this allow you to do samples and make your own stuff, or am I thinking of a different video game out around the same time?
I don't think that the first Parappa the Rapper allowed you to do that.
Okay.
But I might be wrong. It has been a very long time since I played it. Yeah, I don't remember it being able to do that. I'll look into it.
Okay. My number 5 is one that, man, I haven't played since maybe 87, 88. Only because it would have been 87, 88. Only because after I went away to college, I never saw this game ever again. And it's really interesting. I liked it a lot because it had, it's very much like Tempest, where you kind of move in Tempest, you move kind of in this pyramid shape. But in this game, Gyrus, you move in a circle all the way around the screen as you're approaching different planets. And these aliens are flying out at you from the center, and asteroids and other things. And you have to spin around the game, spin around the screen and blast these things. If you're someone that likes Galaga, if you're someone that likes Tempest, this one, again, takes that same concept, puts it in a circle. But the graphics in this, I don't remember if this was one of the early 16-bit games or not, but just holy cow, the colors and the designs and all the capabilities that this game had was really, really cool. Plus, it also had, if I remember correctly, stereo speakers in there, so you could really hear a very cool music soundtrack while you were playing this game.
Yeah, and Toccata and Fugue.
It did it? Okay. Yeah. I enjoyed this game a lot. I cannot find, I see, manuals for this. Apparently there was a plug and play Konami game that had come out a while ago that featured this. But I've been looking for like the original arcade. Can't find these anywhere. But Gyrus, I love the heck out of this game during a couple of summers. And I only knew one college campus in Topeka, Washburn University, that would have it. And occasionally, if I was up in Topeka, I'd swing by the Union and pop in and play a couple $5 worth of Gyrus for a couple of hours, and then head on my way. So my number 5, Gyrus. Number 4, Matthew.
Number 4. Now, the thing about my number 4 is it does not yell at you to skate or die. So in a way, it's inherently not as cool as my number 5. But I think that quantitatively, and other tatively's, it is a superior game. I used to play this in a little gas station in Beloit, Kansas. If you've ever been to Beloit, Kansas, I'm sorry. We did our best, you guys. There's a train track and there's like cows, but in this particular gas station, which was right next to the municipal building and across the street from the post office, there was a jackass, and I don't remember his name, but I didn't like him. But he had the best game in town. You would go in, and it was a sit-down console, which meant that rather than standing and looking at a screen in front of you, you sat and you looked down at the screen, and you would run the little pew, pew, pew. You had the joystick and the pew, pew button. And what you would do is you would sit down. You would put in your quarter and it would start going doodly 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 doo, and it would explain to you that you are a police officer assigned to Sector 9, the home of the toughest thugs in the galaxy. But it's okay because you have a moon buggy. And you are the part of the Moon Patrol, baby. My number 4, Moon Patrol. It's a side scroller.
Yeah.
And this is really, really early. This is like 1982, I think.
Yeah, I remember playing a version of this on my friend Mike's Commodore 64 in like 84, I think.
Moon Patrol is really, really early to the point where it's essentially the first side scroller. You're driving your moon buggy and you have to either jump over or shoot various things that come at you. Sometimes they're enemies, sometimes they're just obstructions, sometimes they're rocks. And you have this specific jump mechanism where it takes a moment to get up in the air because it's a moon buggy. You're not just like leaping up in the air, not like this crazy open world bull crap you kids have today with your Grand Theft Autos and your, I don't know, Hinterlands, whatever the heck. No, you had to time it just right. And if you had two rocks too close together, you literally had to blow one away and jump over the other. It was a complicated, precise thing where you would blow up green squares with your little purple square by shooting little yellow squares. Because, the graphics weren't all that good. But
From Beyond the Moon.
Ooh, but it was a fascinating game. And an endless game because it's an endless side scroller. So there's always more challenges. And the best part is, how some games you have that same setup every time? It doesn't randomize. So you know that level 1 goes doot, doot, doot. Yep. Level 2 goes doot, doot, doot. Moon Patrol didn't do that. Moon Patrol didn't have that kind of memory. So Moon Patrol would be just like random crap. You're driving to the right on the moon. You have a laser and a jump button. Go. And that, my friends, is why I am who I am today. Because life sometimes just throws you on the moon with nothing but a jump button and a laser gun and tells you to figure it out. And then you wake up and you're 48 years old and you're answering phones for a living and you're like, wow, I could use a cat. And that's why Moon Patrol is my number 4 video game. Got a little existential there at the end.
See,
it does
Ashley-
kind of explain your car buying habits.
Yeah. It's as long as it's got a joystick and a laser, I'll drive it.
See, Ashley, this is what you have to look forward to as you approach old age.
You're
I'm
always going to be older than me, sir.
Nah, not by much. Age is just a number, right, Ashley? And speaking of numbers, let's get to your number 4.
That's right. That's why I'm tired all the time. My number 4 is a game that one of my cousins had. And he taught me that if you open up the big orange plastic gun that goes with it and you see the lens and you flip it around, it fires wide instead of fires precisely. And that way, it doesn't matter how good you are at Duck Hunt, you will always win. Which is true. That's a free hack for everyone. You are welcome. It's funny because this is a game that keeps coming up in my life. In university, there was always someone who had this game at a party, and many underage people at various levels of intoxication would engage in. It's never not fun, especially when you suck really, really bad at it. I'm not generally a fan of any FPS type games, whether you have a tool or whether you're strictly playing it from your controller. But this is the one that I love and when I find I will always engage with. So as I struggled to come up with my list, I knew I had to include it. But I suspect I'm not especially good at it because, like I said, my cousin, who's about 15 years older than me, taught me how to cheat at it. I didn't feel like I could responsibly place it any higher on the list. Also, in my notes, it says Drunk Hunt, which maybe tells you a little bit about my formative experience with this
Or
game.
maybe your state when you were typing it.
No, I don't drink anymore.
The other thing that you can do is you can put the gun right on the screen, and it will instantly.
Really?
Yeah.
Yep.
Ooh, I didn't know that.
The weird thing about Duck Hunt, and I don't know what modifications they've made to the game to make it playable today, if you can even play it today, but Duck Hunt would only work with CRTs. So if you're dealing with LEDs or OLEDs or plasma screen televisions, my understanding that Duck Hunt will not work on anything other than a CRT.
Yeah, the people that I've seen who've had it in like the last 10 or 15 years have an old box specifically for that, which is also doubly hilarious when you're at a party and they try to trot it out from, because it's never just in the living room, right? It's always in like the back of someone's closet. I'm sure there's a way that people smarter than I can hook it up to a fancy updated television. But we can't get you that far here on the podcast.
Yeah, I think I watched a YouTube video. It's been a couple of years ago where they're actually saying, look, we tried. There's no way we can figure out how you can get the light gun, which is actually interrupting the signal of the game, to work on anything other than a CRT. And so, that is definitely one of those games that is almost impossible to play anymore because CRTs are just so rare. And
it's hardware dependent.
Listeners, if you can hack that, that's a great reason to hop over to the comments and let us know.
There you go, over at MajorSpoilers.com.
If you want a CRT, I can get you one for $15.
Here's one.
He'll autograph it for you.
Right.
Here's another one. Let's see. We're up to Rodrigo, right? Rodrigo's turn for number 4.
Yeah. Oh, go now?
Yes, go now. Okay. Yes, please.
All right. So my number 4 also came out in 1996. Did not do this on purpose. But there are probably other games that are more formative to the medium, but this one I feel is uniquely relevant, and that's Street Fighter versus X-Men. Street Fighter versus X-Men has a lot of mystique around it. No pun intended, because she's not in it. Well, I guess she could be in it because she could just be
exactly. It's got a lot of Nightcrawler in it.
Yeah. But rumors say that it came about because they had the assets for an X-Men game, and then the X-Men game got canceled. So they were like, "Well, can we just throw in some Street Fighter characters and make this a fighting game?" And then it was a fighting game, and it was a hugely successful game. And it's technically the first one in the Marvel versus Capcom series, sort of retroactively, and it it's important because it's a fighting game crossover. And nowadays, this is extremely common, right? Mortal Kombat 11 is out. And they're already talking about potential, and they've announced that Spawn is going to be in it, right? Todd McFarlane's Spawn. This is something that just happens in video games. Spawn has been in Soul Calibur. Link has been in Soul Calibur. If you have a fighting game nowadays, you're largely expected for it to be a crossover. One of the more popular fighting games nowadays, Super Smash Brothers, is 100% crossover. Like, that's just all it is a crossover. There are characters who aren't even playable in their own games that are playable in Smash Brothers and they've had to like invent moves for them. And it all kind of started up with Street Fighter versus X-Men, which was kind of an accident to begin with. Also, the game's lots of fun, and you get to pick some Street Fighters and some X-Men and have them fight it out. And I really like the art style of this game, and it's one that has long since been abandoned by Capcom. But I will sometimes just look at through like Street Fighter Alpha, Street Fighter versus or X-Men versus Street Fighter, and games of sort of that era. Look through the art because it's really amazing and really had kind of a very transitional aesthetic between that 3D art that we see nowadays, 3D assets, and sort of like just very high end sprite based art.
Yeah. Now, do you remember, Rodrigo, the candy store that used to be here on Main Street in town?
Yes.
Back in the back, they had an arcade of classic arcade games that this guy had. And they had this game back there, X-Men versus Street Fighter. And when they went out of business, the guy's like, I need to sell these arcade games. And I think I've talked about this on one of the major spoiler shows somewhere. I wanted to go in and buy every single game that he had, but at the time didn't have the money. And he was wanting to sell these for, I think, $500 a piece. And I just had to pass. And 3 months later, they showed up in the pawn shop. I wanted to buy them then. Then they had jacked the price up. And then 3 months after that, they were all gone.
Yeah.
And it's one of those games that's like, at the time, this was one of the least of the games that I wanted to buy, but it was in that room of games that he was selling.
Yeah.
But I just never pulled the trigger on that. And I kind of regret it now.
That one had Juggernaut, right?
Yeah. It had Juggernaut, it had Sabretooth, Magneto, Cyclops, Rogue, Gambit.
So half villains.
Yeah. And then on the Street Fighter side, it had Ryu, Chun-Li, Cammy. I want to say it had Dhalsim. It had Zangief.
Is that the one that had...
Wolverine, of course.
That had Ryu's dad?
Well, it has Akuma, who is like big...
Isn't he like Ryu's dad?
I don't think that he's officially Ryu's dad anymore, but he is linked to him. Yeah, he's like a bigger, meaner version of Ryu. So, I don't know where. So the X-Men lore is a moving target, or not X-Men. Well, it is, but Street Fighter lore is a moving target as well. Right. Things actively change as new games come out, and they need to, squeeze a new mechanic into the continuity.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for that one, Rodrigo. My number 4 is also somewhat hardware dependent, and I got a little nervous when Ashley was talking about her number 5, because my number 4 I picked up, I want to say, in 1993 when the Game Boys came out. And back in the day, I didn't have a whole lot of money, so if I was going to drop, like 75 or $80 on a Game Boy, you better bet that there were games that I was interested in playing. And coincidentally, my very first Game Boy came with my very first time ever playing a Super Mario game. I don't count Donkey Kong because that wasn't a Super Mario game. But Super Mario Land on the Game Boy was one that I enjoyed playing the heck out of for, hours at a time. I'd come home at night from the bar and there would be the Game Boy by the bed, and I'd just lay there and play Super Mario Land until, the 6 AA batteries or however many batteries were in the Game Boy suddenly drained. And it was like, oh my gosh, here comes another expense, AA batteries. but I really enjoyed the heck out of, even though it was, green and black and super low res, there's something about jumping over things and shooting things and hoping that you don't die and grabbing as much money as you can while you try to save the princess that I always had fun with. So for me, my number 4, Super Mario Land on the Game Boy. That's probably one a lot of people may have played or may not have played, depending on when you were born and if the Super Mario Land was still available on the Game Boy at the time. So there you go. Matthew, what do you have for your number 3?
My number 3 was a game changer for me. Literal games, not just, metaphorical games. In that most of the games that I grew up with in my youth were just a literal joystick, a stick with a ball on top, and you went bit, 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 and your Pac-Man went left or your Pac-Man went right. This game is the first one that had like a custom control surface. It's like this 8-way joystick with a built-in trigger and a dial to go woo, woo, woo. And the reason it was so damn complicated was that the game you were playing is actually 4 different games. There's like a tower defense game, and then there's a game where you have to like throw your little frisbees and break the shield. And then there's the game where you're driving your little light cycle and going, and then there's a game where you're doing your, low resolution battle tanks, just like the movie Tron. In fact, the game is called Tron. And this is at the Pizza Hut in Beloit, Kansas, which is on the other side of town from the gas station. Just in case you're keeping score. But if you could get to the Pizza Hut, first of all, you could have crappy pizza. And then you could play Tron, and you would have the ability to choose one of the 4 game zones, I think it was. And when you defeated all 4 games, you had defeated the Master Control program, and it would give you like, I don't know, some little thing that would be like, woohoo, you have won, beep, beep, boop, bop, bop. But the thing about it that was so great was that joystick, because instead of having, because I have big meaty hands, instead of having to like wrap your hands like a claw, like you're trying to get your hand around this tiny joystick, you had this large kind of, cuddly one. What's the word that I'm looking for?
I don't know if I would call it cuddly, but it was certainly, it would stick up in it. Like you know how you think of, it had ridges all the way around it.
Yes.
Because not only were you moving it left, right, up and down, you could also twist it.
You could twist it, you could turn it, you could bop it. No, wait, that's a different game. And that's not a video game. I didn't necessarily mean cuddly. I meant, customized or somehow vacuum formed and shaped to your hand, to where you could go pew, pew, pew with your index finger while using that same hand to steer around. And the thing about Tron, for 1983, this was incredible graphics.
Mm-hmm.
This was like, the Master Control program had a face, and that face would emote things, and it would be like, I have eyes and a mouth, and you can tell I am a face.
But the other thing too about it was that it had multiple games in one.
Mm-hmm.
You could do light cycles. You could go play Frisbee Disc. Those are the only 2 that I remember were those 2. But I want to say there were like 5 different games you could play inside that.
You had to fight the bugs, and then you had the big tank battle. But I'm telling you, Tron is a wonderful game. If I were the type of person who bought, an arcade game for my house, first of all, I'd probably have a different house. But if I were, that would be on probably my short list, maybe my top 3, which makes perfect sense because it is my number 3.
Well, the good news is the original Tron Video Arcade game is only $5,500 that has been updated and repaired. There's another one that has been customized to sit down for $2,300. So you better jump on that.
I would want to sit down, but I also wouldn't want to spend $2,300 on a video game.
Yeah, that's unfortunately some of those old games like that. That's $1,500 is around the starting price that I see for a lot of these.
Oh, that's just,
Yeah. You're not going to pick them up for $200, believe me.
No.
All right, Ashley, what do you have for your number 3?
My number 3 is something that I changed once I overheard what the definition of classic actually was, because this is actually my favorite version of this franchise. And it's one of the ones that I fell in love with and I've remained in love with for a long time. So I originally had a game called A Link to the Past
Oh, right,
here
yeah.
because that showed up on a lot of best classic video games lists that I perused in preparation for this. But I actually want to put Ocarina of Time because that is my favorite Zelda game. And that was the one that was very popular when I was coming up. And it was the first time I heard any of the music. And honestly, the music is what endears me to Zelda the most. I was really young when I played this for the first time, and it was the first fantasy game that actually felt and looked fantastical. Now, part of that is because Ocarina of Time was a pretty big graphics upgrade from any of the really more basic designs that had come for these characters before. And then Wind Waker also had like a really big graphic shift. I can't remember if that was the next game or the second to next game after Ocarina of Time. But this was the first video game where I actually was engaged in the story. And it was the first time that I was exposed to really what felt like complex narrative storytelling. Now that's something that can be really taken for granted because you can do astonishing things with video games. Like it's another, at its best, it's an interactive form of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like at the time and for me and for where I was in my life, this was the most immersive, most incredible, most whimsical thing that I'd ever experienced. And then it's really funny that earlier Rodrigo was talking about the Smash Bros games and how characters like show up there who aren't even important parts of their own video games. And I feel like there's a lot of Zelda characters that are sort
Yes.
of
I mean,
like Roy
Zelda-
and Marth.
yeah, well, Zelda is in Smash Brothers. Her power kit is based on the goddess powers that Link gets in
Yes, yeah.
in Ocarina of Time. So yeah, Zelda, you never play Zelda, so they gave her all of Link's powers from Ocarina of Time in Smash Brothers.
And then I think in whatever the Smash Brothers was for the GameCube, that was like the first time Zelda could turn into Sheik,
Yep.
which was really, really cool. And I remember for a long time, there were people who thought that Sheik and Zelda were not the same person. And
Yeah.
that was like the thing that everyone was holding up as evidence that they were. But even though I know there were a ton of games, a ton of Zelda properties that predate Ocarina of Time, that was my point of entry. So it's the one that I wanted to include once I learned that it worked with our definition.
Yeah, definitely.
Of this game. And I think that a lot of people who are of a similar age, a lot of people who like came up in the mid to late 90s, I think that's a very special game to us in the same way that Diddy Kong Racing is, but it didn't make it on my list.
I think, Rodrigo, you've talked highly of that game for many years.
I mean, yeah. Ocarina of Time is a like Ocarina of Time did so much for Zelda, it just completely changed the direction of the franchise. We are still dealing with both good and bad things in the Zelda series that were started by Ocarina of Time. So, I mean, it's huge. It's super important. Yeah, definitely.
Very cool. Thank you, Ashley. Rodrigo, what is your number 3?
My number 3, looking down, also a N64 era game. And looking down at it, perhaps somewhat embarrassingly or telling, my third game on the list that was released in 1996. That must have been a thing.
That's like the 1999 was for movies, apparently.
I think that it was, because my number 3 is Super Mario 64. And Super Mario 64 was really the very first game that was a 3D platformer. And the real amazing thing about it is how many things they got right about it. And you can tell that they were just absolutely prescient in the design of this game, because immediately after, 1,000 3D platformers were created, and most of them are not as good. There's just something about level design. There's something about pacing. There's something about direction. There's something about options. They're just, everything about this game is interconnected in a really good way, and in a way that seems natural. Mario's abilities give him the opportunity to do the same thing in multiple different ways, in ways that either are comfortable for you or provide a different challenge for you. Worlds are no longer linear. You can go in any direction you want. And obviously, it sets the stage for much later games like Mario Sunshine, or now the very highly acclaimed Super Mario Odyssey, right? But if you've played games like Banjo-Kazooie, if you've played games like Croc, or Spyro, all of those games kind of roll out of the idea of Super Mario 64. Crash Bandicoot came out the same year, so I don't think we can really say that one necessarily influenced the other. But seeing as how hard it is to jump and not land right in front of that stupid turtle in Crash Bandicoot, I'm still gonna give it to Mario 64 as far as the controls.
Very, very cool. My number 3, unlike Matthew, my little town that I grew up in, at one time had like a ice cream building that turned into a kind of a pizza place, but it also had a little room that had like one arcade machine in it, and it was Donkey Kong. And then the place either burned down or they went out of business. I forget. This was like
or both.
It could have been. This was when I was a freshman in high school when that happened. But if you really wanted to go play arcade games, you had to drive 10 miles east and go to the Walmart where you could play games like Karate Champ and Spy Hunter. Or the game that did occupy my time, especially my senior year in high school, was a game where it's a side scroller. You are in a ship that you can build as the game progresses. And there's all sorts of xenomorph monsters, horrific looking things with giant eyeballs and blasters coming out of their faces. And you've got to move up and down, left and right, of course, to blow these things away and clear the path so you can clear the level and beat the boss and get to the next stage. It is R-Type. I don't know how many people have played R-Type. I know this keeps popping up a lot in, like, I think it was available on the PS4 as a download. They made it available, and I'm pretty sure that you can get it in a bunch of other, like, Retrocade type stuff. But R-Type was a game where it's like, I would call my friend Mike and say, hey, you want to go play some video games at the Walmart? And we would head off and play R-Type in the main entrance of the Walmart for hours at a time. Just use a whole roll of quarters between us.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know about 16 days, but we would definitely stay there long enough to blow through a roll of quarters, which is about $10, which back in the day, that was a lot of money. Still is kind of a lot of money. Patreon.com/major spoilers.
Yeah. I'm glad that eventually people settled on like horizontal scrolling shooters or scrolling shooters, because calling something an R-Type game gets people think that you're stuttering.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about R-Type is not only could you shoot forward, but in some instances you would have to get in front of the creature and shoot backwards. Yeah. And I always found that was an interesting little mechanic that you sometimes had to shoot up, sometimes you had to shoot down, backwards, sometimes you had to get into little pockets of these giant monster ships flying by so that you could hit them at just the right time and not get blowed up. But man, R-Type is really good. I noticed I don't know how many of you are on the Facebook Marketplace where people in your area are selling various things. Not too long ago, someone had an R-Type machine for sale.
Wow.
And I was contemplating it. I put a post out there saying, hey, if anybody was feeling the love, you can send me, you could buy this and send it to me. Still hasn't shown up at my door, but as of this recording, it's not Father's Day yet.
Oh.
But I think it's still not going to show up.
I think it's been ported to the Switch.
Yeah, it has. It's also on the PS4, I believe. But yeah, I've got R-Type in multiple incarnations. Like every time a game system comes out and I see R-Type pop up, I'm like, oh yeah, I've got to get this. And I know people will probably appreciate, was it R-Type 2? Whatever the second game of that was. I think they may appreciate that more.
It's S-Type, I believe. It's the next one.
But I like the original.
A shirt?
It's R-Type's 11.
Are we really making alphabet jokes?
I mean, it
is. Yes. Welcome to the show, Ashley. Good of you to wake up.
All right, let us move.
Now, is that the one that had the big H.R. Giger kind of monsters?
Yep. All the xenomorphs and everything. Yeah, it was a great game.
No, it's gross.
R-Type is so good. Like you can tell how good R-Type is because there have been thousands of games that are those kind of horizontal scrollers, and most of them aren't as good as the original R-Type.
Yep, exactly. Matthew, let us jump up to number 2 and let's find out what your number 2 is.
Yeah, my number 2 should be no surprise to anyone who has listened to Top 5, because I think anytime something is referencing video games, it comes up. It is the game to end all games. In some ways, the game to begin all games. It's the first game that I recall ever playing that I could say is truly a video game. It's not Pong. I know what you're
That's what I was going to say is Pong.
It's not Pong. I was not Pong people. We didn't have a VCR until 1995, sir. We didn't have Pong with your fancy Pong. No, but we did have, and this is true, we did have the Pump and Pantry. The Pump and Pantry was very near my grade school. It was a little convenience store, perhaps the first convenience store in Beloit, Kansas, which is, like being the valedictorian at night school, I guess. But it had in the corner, in the back, by the wall, Asteroids.
That is a good game.
And the objective of Asteroids, my friends, is to blow up the asteroids. But this is a game from the 70s.
Yeah, it is.
And this is a game when it's all wireframe. And
yeah, not only that, it's vector graphics. So when people are talking about going from 8-bit to vector graphics and stuff, Asteroids had them all beat. It was the first game with vector graphics.
Yeah, and it's very difficult to have a game that is literally just, two-dimensional lines and have it be this vibrant and this awesome. But Asteroids somehow pulls it off. And it has something that I feel like most video games should have, in that it treats the on-screen portion of the game as the entirety of the universe. You can warp out of hyperspace and stop existing, but when you come back into the game. If you exit the screen going left, you're going to come back in the other side of the screen going left. If you exit the screen going up, you're going to come up through the bottom. And so when the alien spaceships start coming to attack you, you can futz around and you can fly up through space-time and come back through the other side of the universe and ambush them, which is like a bacon tree, only smaller. And I love that graphic. And I know that the reason that graphic exists is because it's a very, very limited system. But for some reason, having the screen be the entirety of the universe is not only fun in gaming terms, but also sort of metaphysically pleasing to me. I like the idea of being able to leave the universe and come back in the other side.
Well, it actually, from a game standpoint, it's a game that requires you to think differently, right?
Mhm.
If you see the edges of the screen as bounds, then you are going to lose sooner than if you recognize that they're actually basically portals.
Portals.
That and you
It's a
also had
portal.
to make sure you figured out how to use your thrust powers correctly.
Pew, pew, pew. Yeah, and the thing that's really great is, much like real space, you get that sucker moving and let off the
Mhm.
thruster, you're going to continue going.
Yep.
And if you get it going and you just let it kind of drift, you start spinning in random circles and firing your lasers, and you turn into a death blossom, like that terrible movie
No,
where the
that
guy
great
from
movie.
Xanadu was a lizard. You know the one.
Yes, The Last Starfighter, a great movie.
Maybe I'm thinking of Enemy Mine. I think I'm combining The Last Starfighter and Enemy Mine. But nonetheless, Asteroids is better than both of those movies. And Asteroids is my number 2.
Mm.
And, it's an awesome game, and you should go play it right now.
Yeah. They did, I think, on the Google anniversary, of Asteroids, you could actually play it on the Google main search page.
I actually, the way you are with R-Type, I am with Asteroids. I
Yeah.
have Asteroids on every system that we own. When we were moving, I found my Atari 2600.
Oh, wow.
It
still works.
It functions. Problem is,
Can't
none of our
hook it up to anything.
televisions have
Yeah.
any inputs to which they would hook, but it does work, and my Asteroids cartridge is right in there, and I'm like, ooh, I can
You
go
would
play
have to.
Asteroids.
You would have to get, because that was the original Atari. You had to screw into the antenna jacks, right?
Yep.
So then, at one point, they came up with a antenna, the prongs to a RCA.
Coaxial.
Yeah, an RCA or a coax.
Yeah.
So you could probably get that to work if you went from an RCA to an HDMI input and then plug that into your TV.
Unfortunately, the one that I have only goes to coax. It doesn't have the RCA.
I bet you could still get a coax to VGA adapter. In fact, I've got a bunch of them just laying around the house. But then
Let's ask why, Faithful Spoilerites.
Because in television, you're usually dealing with cables and adapters, and it's often, instead of having, the cable that only does one thing, it's better to just have the coax cable that you can then adapt to BNC, to RCA, to whatever you want. So that's why I have a whole bunch of them. Literally in my change, in my change jar, there's probably a dozen of them that keep falling into the change machine over at the Dillons, just because I never get rid of them. So you could do it, Matthew. I have faith that you can do that. And Ashley, I have faith that your number 2 is going to blow us all away.
I certainly hope so. Although that seems like an awful lot of pressure.
No pressure. This is a pretty laid back, easy show.
Yeah. And the most pressure filled 5 things you'll ever think of.
He's going to be like, this must be the greatest thing ever in the history of the universe.
It can't be the greatest thing.
Down to be told their opinion is wrong. It's going to be the woman on the show.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's why would you even come on? It's like, it's not worth it.
My number 2 is a game that is very beloved by many, many people. So I do apologize if I'm sniping anyone else's choice. It's also my second all-time favorite arcade game, which is why it's at number 2. It's Miss Pac-Man. It's the best Pac-Man. There has never been a better Pac-Man. They should have just retired the boy Pac-Man. It should all have been Miss Pac-Man from this point forward. If you read a lot of the descriptions, or people like to retro review arcade games, which was like a wild rabbit hole that I ran down this week.
They stole that from me,
I know. And especially when they're called retro reviews, I'm like, ooh, Matthew's going to come to your house and hit you with a coax cable.
Give you a bill for $14.
But a lot of people just describe this game as Mr. Pac-Man, but better.
Yep.
Mr. Pac-Man, Pac-Man, but better, or Pac-Man with add-ons.
Mm-hmm.
And even if that's true, I mean, of course, the basic engine is the same because arcades at that time could only handle so much. I'm not quite sure what the ephemera about Miss Pac-Man is that makes it truly so much better. I don't know if it's that she's in full face with a hair bow, but it's like Mrs. Potato Head. It's 1,000 times better than the original.
Yep.
And even though we all know that, she still doesn't get the respect that she deserves. And I know that she's still that great and that relevant because every time you go to one of them fancy retro arcades here in the Valley, especially the ones that don't ask for quarters, there's always at least one Miss Pac-Man, and it's always in perfect working condition. It's never the one that needs to be repaired, because even though it is very simple, it is a very basic game like Space Invaders, the idea is good enough and the mechanics are good enough that we're all still happy to play it.
Yeah, Ms. Pac-Man is my number 1. And it is,
sorry.
No, it's totally fine. This is a fantastic game. I think part of the appeal is there is, of course, the Ms. Pac-Man with the lips and the eye, or the dimple and the bow. It is a little bit of the bow, but also the storyline is much more interesting than in the Pac-Man game, right? The cutscenes every two or three screens, you get the little Ms. Pac-Man, the chase. You get they meet and they kiss and all those different things that happen in that. Just make it super appealing. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, aren't there more fruits than the first Pac-Man game?
I think there are. I think there's some different fruits.
Yeah, and it just feels different, and it is so much fun.
The fruits move in Ms. Pac-Man. Original Pac-Man,
they just stayed right there in the center. Yeah. For me, the reason why Ms. Pac-Man was on my list was because when I first moved out of the dorms in college, there were a couple of laundromats, most of them are still around, that would have an arcade machine, and the one that I would always go to had a Ms. Pac-Man machine sitting in there, and it must have been so good because when I left, moved to Atlanta, then moved to California, and then came back 10 years later, Ms. Pac-Man was still in that laundromat, and I played it until I could afford my own washing machine. I probably could have afforded my washing machine earlier had I not been playing Ms. Pac-Man all the time. But if you're stuck in a laundromat and Ms. Pac-Man is there, I'll line up quarters and just play Ms. Pac-Man until the bell rings.
Put it in airports,
this is, if you go and look, and I don't know why this is, but if you go and look on eBay, and again, I know people are like, Stephen, why are you always looking for? Because I'm looking for the one arcade game that should have been my number 1 but isn't, because it's not there. I mean, it just isn't there. But every time you look up arcade machines or arcade games on eBay, there is a huge volume of Ms. Pac-Man that's up for sale. And of course, back, I want to say like 15 years ago, there was a big push for these. This is probably the start of the retro arcades and the main cabinets where you could get Ms. Pac-Man and Galaga in the same machine, and you could just flip back and forth between the two. So you see
the splitter machine.
Yeah, you could see Ms. Pac-Man everywhere. And it is just such a fun game that it had to be in my number one spot. So yeah, that's a good choice, Ashley.
Thank you.
Yep. Rodrigo, what is your number two?
My number two is a game that I encountered long after it had come out. But I was kind of blown away by it because of the way that it plays. I encountered Dig Dug after I had started playing like Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt and other games. And there is like Dig Dug is a weird game. It's a game. First off, you can move in every direction. You know, the game requires you to dig. And second, the way that you eliminate enemies is by like sticking a nozzle in their mouth and pumping air into them until they blow up,
inflating them till they explode. And you're fighting like dragons and stuff.
Yeah,
it's like lizards and buggies and robots maybe sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. You could also drop rocks on them. You could also drop rocks on them and other things.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways to do it. And I remember being a kid and playing Dig Dug and being like, I don't even know what this game wants me to do, but it's so much fun. Like I'm like, I don't know how to finish a level. Are there levels in this game? Who knows?
It's kind of the opposite of Ms. Pac-Man, right? Where Ms. Pac-Man, you have to follow a specific maze in order to eat the pellets. But in Dig Dug, it's just like you go wherever you want. We're free and open, man.
Well,
you're basically got to defeat the guys, and then if you defeat all of the monsters on the level, you move to the next level, and to the next, and then you get to level 256, and the game glitches, and it puts the bad guy right on top of you, and then you die immediately.
Yeah.
But like Miss Pac-Man, decisions that you make in Dig Dug can really come back to haunt you, because over digging an area gives you fewer options and fewer recourse or less recourse to escape a situation or to get a handle on a monster and things like that. Something that you, for example, don't get with Super Mario Brothers. You know, in Super Mario Brothers, it's about technical skill, and you do make sort of twitch decisions as you're jumping and ducking and doing whatever else. But in Dig Dug, you can look at the map and figure out your angle of attack for things. And if you make bad decisions, and because this is an old game, if you make bad decisions, you might just screw yourself out of being able to complete a level. Which is interesting. I was surprised to find out that Dig Dug was Dig Dug really got me thinking about the fact that like good ideas aren't linear. You know, it's not like we don't come up with progressively better ideas for games. It's like people come up with good ideas, and sometimes those good ideas go away for a long time or don't get, you know, and the industry just kind of follows a particular trend. But that doesn't mean that stuff that has come before wasn't good. And it doesn't mean that an idea like that can't be reused or retreated into something new.
I think Kevin Smith and Hollywood Babylon with Garmin, I think they goofed a couple of episodes. Yeah, Ralph Garman, a couple of episodes ago. They were like, what if Dig Dug became a movie? And they gave a whole really fast pitch on Dig Dug the movie. And it was pretty funny. I think it was Hollywood Babylon. So yeah, that game, haven't thought about that in years. And now within the last month.
Explain
Nope.
why the dragons could phase through solid rock?
Because they're dragons. They're magical.
They're like ghost dragons.
Go. Maybe they are. Maybe that's your job, is you're hunting down ghost dragons.
I guess. I mean, even when you look at Dig Dug's art style or whatever, it's like you're like a spaceman, but there are dragons, and also the little bubbles that you explode have like goggles. So I don't know. It's kind of difficult to pinpoint what exactly the mythology here is.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Thanks, Rodrigo. So my number 2 is one that I never really enjoyed when it was first out. So I mentioned that if you wanted to go play the really cool games, you had to go to the Walmart 10 miles away. But if you were a really cool person who liked to play the video games, you had every store in the 20-mile radius, 20-mile radius, kind of mapped out as to which store had which games. And maybe it was the IPA, maybe it was the Piggly Wiggly. I forget what grocery store it was. We didn't shop
IPA
there. I think it was
booze, my friend.
No, I think IGA was a grocery store. I'm pretty sure. But whatever it was a grocery store we didn't shop at. So I rarely went in there unless I was with some friends. And they would always go to this particular grocery store to play Galaga. And I just really couldn't stand the game at the time. I thought it was annoying. I thought the little, the bombing run noise. I just always thought that was super annoying. I didn't like it because I didn't play it enough to figure out what the pattern was. And just when I thought I was getting good at something, some stupid little hornet would come down and take my ship away. And then if I wanted to get it back, I had to blow up the hornet and then I could get a double shooter. But I could never do it because it was always my last ship that got stolen. So I really hated Galaga when it first came out. But then, as I mentioned, the main cabinets and, the retro arcade stuff has become very popular. And about, I don't want to say, 6 years or so ago, my wife was super kind. And she got me one of those sit-down tabletop arcade machines, like you remember at the Pizza Hut, Matthew.
Yes.
But this one has 600 games installed on it. Every single version of Pac-Man or whatever on there.
Cheating.
Maybe a little bit, but that's how they sell it. You can buy them on Amazon. But one of the games that's on there is Galaga and Galaga 2. But I have rediscovered a love of playing Galaga on that machine. And so Galaga, even though I hated it years ago, I enjoy sitting down and playing it now. And that's why it makes my number 2. So sometimes games you hated years ago, Spy Hunter, Looking at You, you might find a renewed love for when you play it today. So there you go. Matthew, we are now at our number 1 spot, and I'm very interested to find out what your number 1 game is. I'm pretty sure they never made a Black Hole arcade game, so...
Oh, they did. It was terrible.
Okay, just like the movie.
Yeah, wasn't it like a fly-in, like a first-person flying game?
I don't even remember, to be honest, but I'm almost certain there was one. But my number 1 is a game that I actually remember fondly from 2 separate eras because I played it when it first came out. And a few years ago, when my washer cacked out, I played it again with my daughter at the local laundromat while we were waiting for the clothes to dry. And it's called, are you ready? Time Pilot.
Oh, yeah.
It's about this time pilot, see?
Mhm.
And he has this futuristic pew-pew flying around jet plane kind of X-Wing fighter. And you start in the year 1910 and you have to blow up biplanes and occasionally a blimp comes by and hits you with a bomb. And then you warp through time and you have to fight like World War II prop planes, and then a B-25 bomber goes and you have to blow it up. And then you go to 1970 and you're fighting these Huey helicopters and this weird thing comes out and it's the big giant thing. And each time you defeat a level, you warp through time and space to the far-flung future year 2001, where you have to find UFOs.
Right.
2001 at the time was 20 years in the future. It was as far away as anyone could ever imagine. And I, was playing this game with the kid in like 2010, 2012. So, I'm old and I'm super depressed about it. But the thing about Time Pilot that's fascinating is that it's not just a pew, pew, pew game. Much like Asteroids, it has a 3-dimensional aspect in that your ship is always in the center of the field. So it's right in the middle of the screen, and then you move around and the screen kind of goes with you. But even better than that, the ships come out in strange formations. So you can actually get bonuses based on how you blow up the things that come at you. You can get bonuses when occasionally there'll be like a guy in a parachute coming by. You can get him and get bonus stuff, or you can shoot him, and that's terrible too. But the thing that I really love about Time Pilot is the fact that the ship is perfectly maneuverable. You can literally do a 360-degree turn and just And I love maneuverability because in real life, I'm not at all maneuverable. I hit door frames and I kick things and I bump into walls. So I really love being able to be just like whoosh, effortlessly a leaf in the wind and not get impaled by evil space cannibals. But that's neither here nor there. And that's why my number one, Time Pilot.
Mm-hmm. Ashley, what do you have for your number one?
My number one is the only video game that I have on my phone. I don't like generally... What?
Snakes?
I don't know what that is.
What year is it in your head, Steven?
Well, we're talking classics.
She doesn't even know what that is, dude. Did you hear that?
You should look it up, though, because it's a fun game.
Yep.
It is.
Well, this one is not that. It's a puzzle game, and I don't generally like puzzle games. But this one was developed by the Russians to help their army guys be good. And so they did something right. That's Tetris.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tetris is like the peak video game. I can play Tetris for hours. In any medium, freetetris.org is my jam, even though they have really scary ads with really naked anime characters on it. I spend a lot of time on that website. And I also, like I said, it's the only game that I have on my phone, which often blows tiny children's minds. I don't understand why I don't have games on my phone. I don't know what it is about it. I guess it's just addictive and it hits that animal part of my brain. I love that dopamine hit where you clear 4 levels all in a row.
Yep.
The music is awful, but I always leave it on. And it really...
Nope, that's not
it.
Carol.
Dun, 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 dun.
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, it's the worst.
Yep.
It's awful. I also get really irate when I try to play it. Like, there's an arcade version of it, which is fine, but the colors are different than the colors I'm used to. So the square is not blue, and I want the square to be blue. And the really, really tall one is not orange, and I want it to be orange. Like, it's the one that I have the most feelings about, and I get the most irate about. And it's probably the only game that I've ever played consistently for more than a couple months. And it's appropriately retro. It's very old in video game terms. So there was no question when I was making the list that this was going to be the tippity tops. And even though the mechanics of it are so basic, you don't get to any of the more like complicated puzzle games without starting with this. Like, you are literally engaging with something that is the building blocks of an entire industry, and that's kind of cool. And it's cool that it's still effective and fun and challenging, and when you lose, you get mad.
Do you have a Switch, Ashley?
No.
Oh, there's a game. It's called Tetris 99, where you battle 99 other players in a game of Tetris, and as you stack your blocks and clear blocks, you can then attack other players with those, I guess, lines.
Yeah, you send junk lines to other players.
Oh, that hurts me.
Oh, it's insane. Like, the first time I played it, I did really well until I figured out how you're supposed to play the game, and then I just sucked from then on out. But Tetris 99 is a weird game, and it's also somewhat addicting. So if you get a Switch or have someone with a Switch and they have Tetris 99, it might become your new favorite number one in a few years.
Oh, no. Well, yeah, we'll revisit this in 5 years and see.
Exactly. This brings us to Rodrigo in his number one.
My number one is a game that for the NES, it came out in 1990, and it has pretty difficult controls, kind of a weird main character, and is a tie-in for something that you wouldn't expect to be made into a video game. And of course, I'm talking about Yo Noid. Yo Noid is not...
You did not.
Yo Noid is not a good game.
You did not.
It is very difficult. It doesn't really offer a lot of reward for its difficulty, and it features the Noid. So you might ask, Rodrigo, why is Yo Noid so high up your list? And that's because I'm afraid of the Noid, and I worry that if I don't pay some sort of tribute to the Noid, he's going to steal my pizza. So I figure, as tribute, if I put Yo Noid so high up the list, then the Noid won't bother me. Then again, I might accidentally summon the Noid by saying Noid so many times, so I might have signed the sealed the fate of all of my future pizzas.
And then you have to force him to say Dion and go back to the fifth dimension.
Right. Go back to the Domino's that's 2 blocks away from my house.
Yeah, it's right near the B. Dalton that Steven likes to shop.
They still have Domino's pizzas.
I still have B. Dalton too, but they're only at airports.
Yeah. But yeah, in all seriousness, Yo Noid is a super weird game, and it's a game that I actually think about a lot. It is a game that was kind of weirdly formative for me, because it was my first exposure to the Noid, and I was like, what is this character? Where does it come from? What's his deal? And when I played it, probably 91, 92, I feel like the Noid was kind of already out of or on its way out of the media.
Yeah, I think so, right? That would have been like 88 or something.
Yeah, so it's so weird that this game popped up in the 90s, It's like, who is still thinking about the Noid? And certainly by the time I played it, I didn't even know what it was. There weren't commercials with the Noid or anything like that. So, if you want to put this in a historical context, it's a very strange tie-in game. It shows you that you can do a tie-in game around anything, and people will buy it apparently because it's not, it's a game that actually kind of did okay. It's just so weird, like such a weird moment in time that somebody made a game out of a pizza mascot, and it was on the Super NES, and it did okay financially, to the point where I think there was talk of making a second one. It just never came out.
Yeah. I guess this wouldn't have been too far out because the Noid was introduced in 86. 1990 would be within that 4-year range by the time, that became so popular.
Yeah.
And then a game company said, well, we need to build a game around this. And then a year later, that would be about right.
Yeah.
I've only ever played it on the Play Choice 10. Have you ever seen those?
Yeah.
Where it's basically the console that has an NES inside.
Yeah.
And you can play like Excitebike. That's the only place I've ever seen Yo Noid.
Yeah.
And it's freaked me out.
I played it as an original NES cartridge, and let me tell you, that box art is freaky because it's got the Noid and whatever the evil Noid is called, which is not just evil Noid, like it actually has a name.
Is it Void? Starts with a W?
Man, I wish. No, it's like the Morgweg or something like that. It's like there's a Noid mythology, you guys. There's like the Noid has a backstory, and this game does not explore it, but makes you more confused about it.
Wow, that is crazy.
There's an evil green Noid.
There's an evil green Noid, and it has a name. It has
You've got to be kidding me.
Wait,
Hang on,
if he's an evil green Noid, does that mean he makes your pizza better? Because the Noid ruins your pizza.
No, the Noid wants your pizza to be cold.
Well, I know he's going to ruin it.
Well, let's see. The evil green Noid is called Mr. Green.
It's just called Mr. Green, yeah.
So he's like, I don't know, the Noid for people who have color blindness issues, which, I appreciate the inclusionary tactics there, I guess.
Well, we've already done my number one, Ms. Pac-Man, so I thought we'd run through some also-rans, if you guys have some also-rans on your list. The one that I wanted to put on my list, but ultimately I had to say, you know what, I can't, because in order to really have fun with this game, you would have to have 3 other friends with you, and that's Gauntlet.
Yep.
Gauntlet is still my all-time favorite, and when people are wondering when I'm talking about searching for arcade games, I'm still trying to find an original version 1 Gauntlet, and the ones that I usually find are the ones that were like 3 or 4 generations later when the game got much better and the graphics got much better. Also, the other one that I could have put down, but again, multiplayer, TMNT, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 4-person co-op. And then the one that I got so fed up with my freshman year in college, I think, I said I am going to skip the season finale of The Flash because I'll just catch it next year. I went and played the RoboCop game. And I played it and just kept, because
the game?
Yeah, the arcade game. Because the thing was, you could just keep feeding quarters into it and you could continue where your final character died. So I was like, you know what? I'm just feeding quarters into this thing until I get to the top boss and I'm going to win this game. And sure enough, over the course of about 3 hours, I made it all the way from the very beginning of the game all the way to the end of the game and spent I think $7.50 is what I played on that game.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So I didn't even make it through the whole roll. In fact, I had enough left over where I could buy a candy bar at the end. Yes. Matthew, do you have some also rans?
Robotron 2084,
Okay.
which I don't even remember how you play it, but it's a game that I remember standing and playing for hours and hours back when I did things like stand
Mm-hmm.
and when I did things like play. I also have a love for that original Street Fighter, that first stand up with
Yes.
all the buttons and the things and
Yes.
the things and just like
Yep.
all sorts of stuff. And 1943.
Mm-hmm.
Where you are flying in like the bomber and you're like, "Meow," and you can like download upgrades to your plane.
Yep.
I think it's just like a space game with
Pretty
a
much.
similar thing.
Except you're shooting down battleships and
Right.
and zeros and all that
bombs
kind of
and-
stuff. Yeah.
And tanks at certain points. I love that one. And then of course, the greatest game of all time. The greatest game, Ninja Gaiden. You ever play Ninja Gaiden?
No, I
Yeah.
don't think. Maybe.
If
Yeah.
you have Nintendo's
Oh, yeah.
online service, you can play Ninja Gaiden in the on the NES emulator.
Cool.
Yep.
Cool. Ashley, do you
Ninja
have some
Gaiden,
also
you
runs?
just stand there and guys run at you and they try to kill you.
Mhm.
I almost put the Simpsons arcade game on
mhm.
here
Yeah.
because that's a pretty great one. I also almost put the Twilight Zone pinball game on here because it's my favorite pinball game, but I didn't know if that counted as a video game.
Yeah,
or
I don't
not,
think
so
it
I
does
didn't.
I don't think
I
it does.
know.
I thought about it too because pinball has become a huge other big deal. That
Totally.
as you said, the video arcades are a big deal. The pinball arcades are a super big deal right
Yeah,
now.
they're
So
great.
yeah. So Rodrigo, did you have some also rans?
Yeah, you guys remember the Moonwalker arcade game
No.
where you
Oh
where you,
my
Where you
played-
play
where
Michael
you played
Jackson?
a Michael Jackson, and
Yeah.
I say a Michael Jackson because it's a 4. You could have up to 4 players, each one playing a different color outfit Michael Jackson.
Oh wow.
And sometimes a monkey would come by, and if you touch the monkey, you turn into a robot.
Oh, boy. That hurts my brain on so many different levels.
Oh
Hey.
no, but it's even better. He's not making this up.
Nope. Sometimes when you like get to a point or your bar is full, you then start dancing and you do a Michael Jackson dance, and all the enemies dance with you. And when your dance is over, they explode.
Wow. Wow. I think that's the perfect place to end this episode of Top 5. Thank you, Ashley, for joining us this week. Tell our listeners where they can find more stuff from you.
Oh, you can catch me every week on the Major Spoilers podcast. You can also catch Geek History Lesson hosted by myself and Jason Inman, also in the Major Spoilers podcast feed. So why don't you just go ahead and subscribe to the master feed so that you can get all of that good stuff. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Ashley V. Robinson. The V is very important.
All right, listeners, this is the part where you come in. Head over to majorspoilers.com. In the comment section for this episode, share your top 5 classic video games. You played them when they originally came out. You just played them recently in some kind of retro arcade system. Just let us know what they are. Or even better, you can head to our Discord server. Ooh, and you can hang out with a bunch of other spoilerites. And
Fancy.
there's a top 5 channel that you can go in and you can talk about top 5. You can make top 5 suggestions in there, although I probably won't see them all. So it's still best to send an email to podcast@majorspoilers.com. But go check out the Discord server. Go check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/majorspoilers. That's how we're able to keep this show going at least twice a week. And if we hit that goal, we could even make this a weekly show. Find out more at patreon.com/majorspoilers. Why do we want to make this a weekly show? I think it's pretty obvious, listeners. Everyone loves a list.
This podcast is copyright 2019 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.